Hi everyone. Happy summer. Hope you're having a great summer. I have not been with you for a while. It's been a crazy busy time, and I am preparing for the annual camping trip of my trans choir that is starting tomorrow. But I wanted to get on. First of all, since I haven't been on for a bit, let me just introduce myself. So, my name is Sam Bullington, and I am a writer and public speaker. Um, Gender studies college professor and trans spiritual teacher, and a shamanic counselor and healer, the founder and director of Phoenix, Colorado's trans community choir, and the founder of an 8-week online spiritual empowerment program for trans and gender expansive leaders. So that's me. Last weekend, then I spoke, actually a couple weekends ago. Last weekend I was at the Rise Music Festival with Phoenix, having a blast. I'm still recovering from my sunburn because it was unbearable heat. But 2 weekends ago, then I gave a keynote at a pagan conference on rites of passage, and I spoke about the power of the liminal phase, or the middle stage of rites of passage, and about transgender people as liminal people. And so, as I was thinking about that and thinking about this group, then I thought that some of the information that I presented could be helpful, not only in thinking about the role of trans people in society, but in navigating all of the stressful changes that we are going through as individuals and also collectively as a society. And so I decided I'm going to do 3 Facebook Lives on that particular topic. So the one tonight, I'll talk a little bit about what is liminality, what are we talking about, and about American society being in a liminal phase right now. Later in the week, on Thursday, then I will get on and I will talk about trans people as a liminal population and what that means for how we're treated in society and some of our challenges, as well as some of the power of the liminal space. And then next weekend, then I will get on again and I will talk some about strategies for working with liminal stages in our personal lives. So welcome, Daniel, and welcome, Amanda. Thanks for being here. So I like to open my talking about liminality by talking about my love of road trips, because I love road trips. I'm a Sagittarius, and so I could be on a road trip pretty much continually for the rest of my life and be pretty happy. And so one of the things that I most love about road trips is that most of the journey you are betwixt in between. So you are in process, you're neither here nor there, and so you are thus spared the stresses and responsibilities of either location. And so you are a stranger on the open road, without a stationary role in the community. And what's most required of you is simply paying attention and being in the present moment. And so this is some of the gift of the liminal space, the time outside of time. It's a very potent and liberating space, full of possibility. And so for myself, I notice, for instance, whenever I'm traveling, that it's a really fertile time for my writing. So sometimes I just feel the words just spilling out of me. Because, when we're traveling, then we are out of our usual structure of our days and away from our usual environments filled with the people and objects and reminders that tend to pull our attention away from our inner process. And so as a result, we are more able to be in the present moment. And in the present moment is where, our creativity and our insights and our flow can be found. And so I first became acquainted with the concept of liminality when I was in grad school. And I found it absolutely fascinating. There are ways that learning about liminality spoke to me on a personal level in the ways that few other things had. And so, though this was a year before I came out as trans, on some level, then I really grasped that, I was fundamentally a liminal person, that my home was in the gray areas outside of the usual human community. And so I felt a deep kinship with the concept in similar ways that I felt an identification with the shamanic path, which is another kind of classic liminal space as the mediator between the human and the spiritual realms. And so, in a world that just rarely had any reference points for me as a transgender person, then liminality and shamanism felt like, two kind of intuitive guideposts that kind of let me know that there were other things in the world that were like me, even if I didn't have the language to explain exactly why I felt such a strong personal identification. Because being transgender, is also a liminal space, being betwixt and between. So it's a liberating and fluid and inventive free space, removed from, the onerous stresses and toxic responsibilities of being a man or a woman. And so while there's considerable freedom in the liminal space, as it's not subject to the same kind of rules as ordinary community living, the liminal stage in a rite of passage is fundamentally a time of test and ordeal. And so taking up residence in the liminal stage has not made for a very easy journey. And so while the rewards of being on such a steep path of growth are really great, the challenges have been pretty relentless. I'm sure many of you can identify with. So I want to talk a little bit about, what is liminality exactly, because it's kind of a fancy sounding word. And so in a rite of passage, then there are 3 stages. And so liminality is the middle stage. And so that's what happens when you are removed from community and you're stripped of your former identity. And then you undergo both trials and learning before you are then reintroduced back into the community in a new role and a status. And so the liminal stage is fundamentally about being betwixt and between. And so if you think about, for instance, adolescence as being a liminal time. And so, you're not still a child, but you're not yet an adult. And so teenagers tend to have kind of an ambiguous place with regards to both social status as well as physical development. Middle age is another one of those times when you are neither young nor old. And so people tend to go through some pretty frequently dramatic self-reinvention during this time. I happen to be doing both simultaneously, which I don't know that I would recommend, as my former self is in middle age and my current self is just 12, and so firmly entering into adolescence. And so I know a lot about liminality, and in my third piece of this, when I talk about, how do we best use the liminal stage in our personal lives, and I'll talk a lot about my own personal journey. Also with the temporary stages that I'm in with regards to professional reinvention since Trump was elected, as well as the breakup of my marriage a year ago. And so I feel like I've been in a lot of liminal places. So I've put a lot of thought into how do we make it work for us the best. So the word liminal comes from the Latin, which means threshold. And so it is really about standing at a doorway that you haven't yet gone through. And we don't really know what lies on the other side of the threshold. And so there is a lot of uneasiness that is kind of inherent in the concept. From the same root, we get words like preliminary, which is about preceding something important, as well as subliminal, which is really about being below the threshold of consciousness. And so liminality is fundamentally a space of transition and transformation, hence something that transgender people know a lot about. And so there's generally 4 types of passage that happen in contemporary society. And so you can think about when people shift from one status to another. So when an outsider is brought into a group after passing a test to prove that you're ready. So you think about something like becoming a citizen or students going through graduation. The second is when people move from one place to another, such as literally moving across the country to a new home. Or when people move from one situation to another, So you can think about beginning or ending a job or beginning or ending college as being examples of that. And then there's ones that simply mark the passage of time, such as birthdays and also New Year's as examples. And so there's also liminal spaces, such as stairwells and elevators and airports. And the purpose is really to take us from one place to another. Also liminal times, such as the period between death and burial, between engagement and marriage, the limbo of graduation, like when you're done with all the stress of finals, but you haven't really moved on to the next phase yet, as well as twilight. This is one of my favorite times of day, being a liminal person. So, the time between day and night. And so hence the twilight zone, is truly a place where events out of the ordinary can occur, and therefore a space of possibility, but also one of fear and unsettledness. And so liminality can be a stage for an individual, for a group, and also for a society. And so over the course of these 3 videos, I'll talk about all 3 levels, how we can deal with it individually, about transgender people as being an example of a liminal group. And tonight I'll talk about the liminal phase that we are in American society. And this can happen either in a moment, by a sudden event, such as a divorce or death, graduation, on the societal level, something like a natural disaster or a revolution, or a time period. So for instance, puberty or college would be examples of those kind of prolonged, but also temporary periods. Or it could be a permanent status, especially for outsider groups in society, such as trans people. So later in the week, I'll talk about trans people as a liminal group. And so while the liminal stage can certainly be stressful, it also offers many gifts. And so the instability of liminality can allow access to other realms of understanding and kind of a free combination of elements that can create new possibilities. And not just in our individual lives, but also in our collective evolution as well. And so, there's a reason why liminal figures like trans people are feared, because, we bring the possibility of dramatic societal change, which is the exciting part. And so we are living in just such a societal liminal phase, a period in between 2 fundamentally different worldviews, a pivotal age in which many of our foundational assumptions about life are being reformulated. We're being faced with the realities of our interdependence and being given a pretty stark choice to change or perish, which is oftentimes what is required for us to change. Like, we'll try anything else but that. And so, as a society, we are no longer in the preliminal stage, and we cannot go back. But we've not yet begun to really transition into our post-turmoil, what's next world. And so instead, we are in the unsettling time in between, where continuity of tradition has become uncertain, in good and healthy ways, I think, where future outcomes that were once taken for granted are thrown into doubt, and where everyday life becomes a series of painful tests, you may have noticed. So, the disillusion of order during liminality creates a fluid and malleable situation that enables new institutions and customs to be established. The dissolving of the old brings fresh perspectives, a withdrawal from kind of the habitual, normal kind of modes of social interaction, allowing something different to happen, and a period of scrutiny of central cultural values. That's a big part of the purpose of the liminal phase, is really to hold cultural values under the microscope, to really understand them and to intervene in them. And so this is where ordinary limits to thoughts and behavior and self-understanding can be undone. It's a time of being broken down and being vulnerable, which is what we need oftentimes in order to create change. And so much like in the 1960s, then, there's a time where people are starting to ask radical questions about the nature of life and society, and where the unquestioned grasp on life is becoming loosened as people lose faith in a lot of the ordinary structures of life. A time of societal uncertainty leading to significant social change, which is also a big period of stress. Having had a close-up view of this process in South Africa as well. There's definitely hopefulness to it, and also there's a lot of societal stress that happens during those times. And so there might be a sudden foregrounding of agency as longstanding institutions break down, or unique perspectives might arise about what came before and what might come next. And so, transitions are times when the normal limits to thought and self-understanding and behavior are relaxed, opening the way to novelty and imagination, to construction and destruction, and where events and meanings and indeed reality itself can be molded and carried in different directions. And so I think this is incredibly hopeful and exciting. And so, one of the big challenges on the societal level where we are right now is that, what comes after the liminal phase is completely unknown. And so ordinarily in rites of passage, you have ritual elders who have gone through the process who then lead people through the process. And so the process that we are going through currently, we don't really have obvious ritual elders who have gone through that process before who can really help to lead us to the other side. And so the vacuum that is created can allow for the emergence of destructive self-proclaimed leaders, as we're living in now. And it could also foster the arising of egalitarian empowerment, which I feel is starting to happen. And so, this is where I believe the role of trans people in society lies. And so that's what I will talk about next time. So thanks so much for being here. Welcome also Alistair and Terry. It's great to have you. So if you want to jump in on any comments or questions for this first segment. So as I mentioned at the beginning, on Thursday, I will jump on around this time and talk about transgender people as liminal figures. And then next weekend, then I will talk about going through liminal stages in our personal lives and how do we use those to our best advantage. How do we cope with the stresses involved, and how do we use it actually to create something happy and powerful in our lives so that we are better on the other side, so we don't have to just survive these times. All right. Well, thank you for being here tonight. It's good to be back. And got to go get ready for my camping trip tomorrow. And I look forward to checking in with you in a few days.